Hello everyone, Mike the Warrior here. We're back with another 5 facts video, but today I'm going in a bit of a different direction. For the first time on the channel, we're going to be doing a 5 facts video on a Bakugan. And who better to start off than the man, the myth, the legend, Hydranoid. I'll be honest with you, I wanted to do Leonidas first with the last 2 videos. It felt like a really good segue. However, when I was doubling up on some research, I came across some stuff that made me want to change my first attempt. What am I talking about? Well, you'll find out in a minute because Hydranoid's actually a bit more interesting than we thought. Without further ado, let's get started. In the beginning, Vestroia, the homeworld of the Bakugan, had 6 different realms where Bakugan of each different attribute were able to live in. However, they also had some special Bakugan called the White Ones. They didn't actually have an attribute. Eventually, one of them, Naga, decided that he was tired of being weak, so he went over and tried to steal the Silent Core, one of the 2 orbs that basically holds everything together. But he wasn't strong enough to take the other core just yet, and everything just kind of fell apart. That's how the Bakugan ended up in the human world, more or less. Naga wanted the Infinity Core no matter what, but he wasn't strong enough to leave and go after it himself just yet, so he allowed his pawn Masquerade to go search for it for him. Masquerade's original Bakugan partner was Reaper, and they had something called the Doom card. Those who were defeated with the Doom card were sent to something called the Doom Dimension. For the first couple of episodes, after meeting Masquerade and Reaper, Masquerade decides to lend his partner to some of the other pawns that he was able to come into contact with if they had a Darkest attribute. I'm pretty sure the writers did this to try to add the tension to the battles, seeing that, oh no, Masquerade's Bakugan is with this person that we have to fight for this episode. I wonder if Dan and Drago are going to win this time. But eventually, it was time for Dan and Masquerade's eventual rematch. But we've seen Reaper lose to Drago quite a few times. How do we make sure that Masquerade is still a threat? Well, he reveals his true ace in the battle, Darkest Hydranoid. And he claims he is the strongest Bakugan ever, as he feeds off of the Bakugan that he sends to the Doom Dimension. Hydranoid, also being a Dragon-type Bakugan, seemed to be a perfect rival for Drago, and while he did lose in his debut episode, it was pretty clear that this was only possible because Shun and Dan had to team up to stop Masquerade. And right before they were able to win, Masquerade said something that was pretty scary. Hydranoid is evolving. At the time, we haven't seen a Bakugan evolve yet. Eventually, Drago evolved into Delta Dragonoid, and Masquerade followed this up by going on a bit of a speed run and went after all of his old subordinates, sending all of their Bakugan to the Doom Dimension with each victory. By the time he had to fight Klaus, who was the former number 2, the worst case scenario happened and Hydranoid evolved into Dual Hydranoid mid-battle. Dual Hydranoid because, well, he grew a second head. He could also stand on his legs now. He later sent Klaus's Bakugan Cyranoid to the Doom Dimension and became even stronger, and then it was finally time to get rid of their biggest obstacle, Dan Kuso. After an insane battle, Hydranoid was able to defeat Drago and sent him to the Doom Dimension, along with Dan and eventually their friends. All hope may have seemed lost, and Hydranoid was even able to track down his goal, Wyvern, who had acquired the Infinity Core. But despite how insanely powerful he became, he was no match for the Infinity Core. But this didn't stop Masquerade or Hydranoid, as they knew the obvious answer was they just needed to get more power. Masquerade then goes to the Doom Dimension and challenges the 6 legendary warriors to a battle, and Exedra accepts the challenge. After Masquerade wins, Hydranoid is able to evolve even further into Alpha Hydranoid. But before he was able to have a rematch with Wyvern, Drago also wanted to run back because, he had to protect his girl and all. And an even more insane battle happened where the 2 kept tying as their powers weren't equal, but eventually Dan and Drago were able to pull off the win. After this victory, Masquerade decided to help Dan fight off Naga's forces. The team up was a one-time thing, as he then relinquished his spot as Hydranoid's partner and gave it to his alter ego, Alice. And at first, it probably seemed like a weird choice to have the sweetest girl in the world be paired up with this demon lizard, but the 2 actually made a pretty good team, and they were surprisingly on the same wavelength once Alice got her confidence up. Once the war was over, Hydranoid and the rest of the Bakugan went back to New Vestroia that Drago created after becoming the perfect core. 2 years later, some invaders calling themselves the Vexos came and captured all of the Bakugan, including including Hydranoid. We don't know exactly how he got captured, but we know that the original 5, well, I say 5 because Drago was the perfect core at the time, who saved the old Vestroia, were turned into statues. Hydranoid put up quite a fight as they were experimenting on him, and this eventually caught the attention of Mira, who would later form the Resistance, as it was in this moment she realized that the Bakugan are living creatures and not just mindless, well, toys that they can play with. Not only did he inspire Mira, but also Spectra, as Spectra's goal was to create the ultimate Bakugan. And in a flashback, while Mira was running away, she sees that Keith, Spectra's true identity, was in the room while Hydranoid was being experimented on. After they were granted their freedom, Hydranoid made the decision that he wanted to go back to Earth because he wanted to see Alice again, showing that he did care about her. But going back to the experiments, Professor Cly, the lead scientist of the Vexos, found Hydranoid quite interesting, and he inspired him, just like his children, but in a different way, to create a mechanical Bakugan based off of Hydranoid called Hades. Alice would eventually battle Shadow Probe, and we would have Hydranoid versus Hades to see if the original was superior to its mechanical copy. And that is all I'm going to say on this battle. This is the final hurrah for Hydranoid, as Alice is kind of written out of the show after New Vestroia, and she wasn't really doing much in this season anyway, so that wraps up the origin portion of this video. Hydranoid is based off of the Greek dragon Hydra, or serpent. In the story, Hercules battles Hydra for its second labor. However, it wasn't an easy task because the Hydra could just regrow its head. Specifically, if you cut off one of its heads, 2 more grow in its place. In Drago's second battle with Hydranoid, he was able to blow off one of Hydranoid's heads, but he was able to grow it back a few seconds later, which is kind of funny because Hydranoid's second evolution, he has 3 heads, so technically he still got 2 heads after this encounter. This is something that might go over some of your heads, so I might end up repeating myself quite a bit for this fact. Hydranoid has some very unique special abilities, and I'm not actually talking about his ability cards, though they are also pretty crazy too once you break them down. Since we just talked about it, let's go back to the thing about him losing his head. Remember how I had just said that Drago blew off one of his heads and Hydranoid just grew it back? Well, in the video where I broke down the rules of the Bakugan anime, I didn't cover this because I couldn't figure out why this happened. Growing up, I always figured this was a game mechanic that they didn't explain, but this turns out it's actually something unique to Hydranoid that he can actually do. Like how Preus and Elico and Elfin can change their attributes, Hydranoid's unique trait, if I'll just call it that, will be if you sacrifice one of your ability cards, your little meteor down here drops down, and Hydranoid is able to regrow one of his heads, and the battle is then declared as a draw. This was only done once, but I don't really blame the writers for not abusing this, though it could have been broken if they really wanted to. A lot of people just didn't aim for the head. Also, the ability card sacrifice can no longer be used in that game. And in case you're a little confused on how this works, I'm going to use a Yu-Gi-Oh example real quick. This is Blue Eyes White Dragon. This is Dark Magician. Dark Magician is weaker than Blue Eyes. So, in a battle, Dark Magician is attacked by Blue Eyes and destroyed. If you banish one of your ability cards or remove it from the game, you can bring Dark Magician back and you take no damage from that battle. Also, that ability or spell card cannot be used for the rest of the game, nor can its copies if you have any others. Hopefully that made sense. And this second part that is unique to Hydranoid is something that I had just found out, though I'm not 100% sure if this is true, so take it with a grain of salt. When a Bakugan evolves, they lose access to some of their ability cards. For example, Boosted Dragon is one of Drago's abilities, and when he evolves into Delta Dragonoid, it turns into Delta Dragonoid. And Tigrura has the ability Cut and Saber. However, that turns into Velocity Fang when she evolves. You can no longer use those old abilities, you gotta stick with these new ones. You know, like how Pokemon kinda does it. They get some new ability. Anyway, the reason I bring this up is because according to the Bakugan website, Hydranoid has access to all of his abilities with each evolution. So if this is true, Hydranoid so far is the only Bakugan in the first gen of Bakugan that can access all of them. I don't think you guys realize how broken this is, so let's go with another quick example. So this is Alpha Hydranoid. this is Cyborg Helios Mark II. Cyborg Helios is fighting on top of the gate card, Pyrus Reactor. Let's just say it gives him 200, and then there's Blackout Cannon. If this attack connects, Hydranoid would lose, right? Alpha Hydranoid could then just use Merge Shield and Fusion ability Destruction Buster. Destruction Buster, negates a gate card and boosts up some of his power. Merge Shield allows Hydranoid to gain power based off of all the G power gained from his opponent throughout that entire battle. And with the way the rules changed up later on, Masquerade or Alice could have just spammed this at any point. Again, if this is true, Hydranoid would have been completely busted if they ever actually applied this to the show. Again, if this is true. It also would have made this battle a lot less infuriating because then he couldn't lose, but I already said I wasn't going to talk about it, so let's move on. After Mactanium Surge ended, after a couple years away, they finally decided to bring Bakugan back in a full reboot for a younger generation, or new generation. Dan and Shun were both brought back, though they clearly look different, as this is technically a new incarnation of their characters, but they're not the only ones. Hydranoid also is back. This time, however, he's Aquas. One of the main reasons that Hydranoid was so powerful is he had a really great arsenal of abilities that he could use to attack Bakugan from anywhere on the field. Also, his fusion abilities, Destruction Buster and Destruction Impact, had this shared effect that they could also negate the gate card that they were on. However, Alpha Hydranoid's fusion ability doesn't have this effect for some reason. Final Demolition just adds 100 to Alpha Hydranoid. Speaking of abilities, Hydranoid is the only returning Bakugan to not get any new abilities when he shows back up in New Vestroia. And to make it even worse, they also nerfed him by taking his G power from 150 to 500. I'm going to do a proper analysis of this battle with Shadow Probe in the future, but in case it wasn't obvious, they really did do him dirty. But to end this on a bit more of a positive note, here's a little bonus fact. As we all know, Alice is this super sweet girl, and here's Hydranoid, one of the scariest Bakugan we ever seen. If you've watched New Vestroia, you know that Hydranoid surprisingly has a soft spot for Alice, and this might not be the only instance that we see he isn't as mean as we thought. In the dub, at least, Ingram claims to be Hydranoid's old friend, and it's actually kind of nice knowing that, well, he got along with someone. And this isn't too relevant, but Ingram's voice actor had changed, so throughout the entirety of the first arc of New Vestroia, I assumed Ingram was a girl, so when Ingram drops the bomb that they're friends, because I was a dumb little kid, I figured, oh, does Hydranoid also have a girlfriend like Drago? Made me chuckle a bit. And with that, we have another 5 facts video done. Thanks for watching. The next video, I'm either going to be breaking down the Alice versus Shadow Probe battle, or I'm going to be discussing the Ultimate Warrior gene. I haven't really decided yet, and I haven't written a script for either, but that's kind of where I'm feeling at the moment. But let me ask you guys a question. How do you feel about Hydranoid? Be sure to let me know down in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys next time.